1. This past October, my friends Marco, Tasha, and I decided to book a ghost tour through a local ghost touring company here in Salt Lake City, Utah. On this particular night, the ghost tour we had booked was for Fort Douglas Military Cemetery. This cemetery was established in 1862 and is the burial ground for thousands of fallen soldiers during the Battle of Bear River, the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean conflict, and the Vietnam conflict. Also interred in this cemetery are 21 German prisoners of war from World War I, also 20 German, 12 Italian, and 1 Japanese prisoner of war from World War II. This place is packed full of history. This would be my first paranormal ghost tour and hunt. I've always believed in the paranormal, ghosts and spirits. Hell, I even believe in aliens. But this would be the first time for me doing anything like this. You could say that I was pretty excited. The tour starts out with our tour guide telling us stories about a select few graves, including a governor, a brigadier general, and the guy who bayoneted Crazy Horse, along with the history of the entire cemetery. It didn't look it from the outside, but this cemetery was huge. The introduction lasted a little over an hour or so, and they send you off to do your ghost hunting. They also provide you with flashlights, EMF meters, pendulums, and dowsing rods. Whenever I watch those paranormal shows on TV like Ghost Hunters, Most Haunted, and Ghost Adventures, I always see them using similar devices like these, and I'm always skeptic about it. You know those shows are dramatized for television. When they were sending us off into our own groups to investigate, they were handing out the little gadgets to whoever wanted them. I opted for the dowsing rods. I've never used dowsing rods before, and whenever I'm watching these paranormal investigators on TV use them, I just think to myself, oh, they're just subconsciously moving their hands slightly to manipulate the movements of the rods. And when I held them, they did swivel around with the slightest movement. So already I wasn't expecting too much from the rods. The first site that Marco, Tasha, and I decided to visit was a grave of a German Nazi soldier that was quietly tucked away next to a large tree. We literally had to wait in line for other groups to get in their investigations because everyone was intrigued by the tiny quarter-size swastika carved into the headstone. One guy literally sat there and took 100 photos all in sequence, hoping he could catch some type of orb or ghost ectoplasm from the headstone. When he was finally done with his photo session, it was our turn to have some time with this Nazi soldier. I began to ask a question using my dowsing rods. Are you proud of who you are? Nothing. Next question. Do you have a problem with my friends and I standing on your grave? Side note, my friends and I are not white. I'm Thai, Marco and Tasha are Mexican. Much to my surprise, I feel a strange magnetic pull passing through my hands and into the dowsing rods, and they began to move across each other on their own. It was a feeling that I've never felt before, and it got me all excited that I was experiencing this. Maybe the dowsing rods aren't a quack gimmick after all. I continued to ask the Nazi soldier a few more questions. I asked, do you have family here? If so, move the rods to the left. The rods remained static. I then asked, are you angry that I'm asking you these questions? If so, move the rods to the right. And, to my amazement, with the same magnetic sensation flowing through both of my hands, the rods slowly moved to the right. Marco, Tasha, and I all jumped in excitement. We couldn't believe that this was happening. I then asked, do you want us to leave? For yes, move the rods straight forward. The rods moved straight forward. Even though we may not agree with what this soldier stood for and his beliefs when he was alive in the physical world, we respect his wishes. We complied and respectfully walked away from the Nazi soldier's grave. We started wandering around the cemetery looking for other grave sites to investigate. The three of us had no other luck with some of the other graves we chose to stop by while we wandered. For most of the night, I no longer felt the magnetic sensation, and my dowsing rods remained static for most of the other graves. As we continued to scope out new areas of the cemetery to investigate, I was strangely drawn to a specific location by two large trees. Something about that area just pulled me towards it. I decided to walk to the 2 trees. Marco and Tasha followed. I held up my dowsing rods in front of me, and the magnetic sensation flowed right through my hands again. The dowsing rods were pointed straight, and I was headed right to a specific grave that was sat below the 2 large trees. As we approached this one particular grave, I read the name carved into the headstone: Michael Quinn, August 4th, 1829, March 14th, 1866. It was a simple inscription. Not much else was said on the flat headstone. For some odd reason, I felt a sadness and loneliness and isolation take over my body. These emotions came out of nowhere. I then proceeded to ask some questions. Is there anyone here with us? For yes, please cross the rods together. And with that now familiar magnetic flow, the rods crossed without any hesitation. My heart sank. The magnetic flow seemed stronger, and the rods seemed to have more force behind them as they moved in my loose grip. Are you Michael Quinn? For yes, please uncross the rods. The rods uncrossed. My heart began to pound out of my chest, my hands began to tremble, and my palms began to sweat. I relaxed, calmed myself down, and took a deep breath. I introduced myself and my friends. Hello, Michael, my name is Drew, and these are my friends on my right, Marco and Tasha. Next question. Are you here alone? For yes, move the rods to the right. The rods moved to the right. Do you have any family here with you? For yes, move the rods to the left. The rods remained static. Are you aware that you have passed away? For yes, please move the rods forward. The rods slowly moved forward. My heart sank deeper and deeper as I was asking Michael questions. The emotions of sadness and loneliness sank in further and further. Do you have any children? For yes, please move the rods to the left. The rods moved to the left. Were you married? For yes, move the rods straight forward. Rods moved straight forward. Remember, Michael was born in the year 1829 and died in 1866. That would make him around the age of 37 when he died. This would mean that he was still more than likely married to his wife, and his children may have been young when he passed away. I continued with the questions. Do you feel alone? For yes, please cross the rods. As I was asking this very question, tears began to fill my eyes. The rods crossed. Do you like us being here talking to you? For yes, please uncross the rods. The rods uncrossed. As the dowsing rods uncrossed for this question, I could feel in my heart a slight happiness. I said to Michael, well, it's very nice to meet you, Michael. My friends and I are very glad to have this experience with you. As I said that, I felt a calm come over me. It felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted, and that my heart was rising up in my chest. There was no more sadness, or a sense of loneliness, a sigh of relief. It was time for Marco, Tasha, and I to say goodbye to Michael Quinn. It was nearing midnight, and the ghost hunt was coming to an end. The tour guide approached us, and she asked us how it was going. I filled her in on our experience with a man named Michael Quinn. An expression of fascination came over her face. I asked if she was familiar with Michael, and she responded that she had no idea who he was. She said that she would do some research on Mr. Quinn, and that she would contact me via Facebook Messenger if she found anything. As I returned my borrowed dowsing rods and said our goodbyes to our tour guide and a few other investigation groups, I looked back at the location where the 2 large trees were and where Michael Quinn had been resting for the past 151 years. It was as if I had made a new friend and had to say goodbye to him, all at the same time. I felt like I've made a real connection with Michael. It was actually a sad moment for me to leave. Later the next day, our tour guide sent me a message. She had found something on Michael Quinn. Michael Quinn was a Freemason. He had a wife, Adelia, and 3 sons, Charles, Stephen, and John. When Michael died, his youngest son, John, was only 4 years of age. The tour guide didn't find the cause of death or anything else on Michael, just that he was not originally from Utah, and that he more than likely came to Salt Lake City for work and unexpectedly died. After thanking the tour guide for her help in the research, I decided to do some research of my own on Michael Quinn. As the tour guide stated, not much could be found on this man, but I did come across on some things that had happened with his family after his death. As soon as he died, his wife Adelia and their 3 sons did not stay in Utah much longer after that. I believe that his wife and sons all moved back to Illinois, where the family and Michael himself were originally from. Adelia soon remarried to a man named James Berry, and the two together had 2 daughters, Rosalia and Nellie. Michael has no family or relatives buried in Utah, nor does he have any known relatives living in Utah. Michael was pretty much left behind while his family moved away and moved on with the rest of their lives. It is unknown if any living descendants are even aware of him, which may explain the sad and lonely emotions that I felt when I had visited his grave on that October night. I don't think anyone has visited his grave since the day his family decided to leave Utah and head back to Illinois. For 151 plus years, Michael has been alone with no known visitors. That was until my friends and I decided to book a ghost hunt and tour. We were probably his first visitors in a long time. I like to think that he enjoyed our company. I sure enjoyed meeting him, even if it was from the other side. 2. This is the story of The House. Long ago and far away, I rented a house from a friend when I left my ex-husband. It was the house she had grown up in, and she neglected to mention that it had some otherworldly residents in it. At this point in time, 2 out of 4 children were still in the home. 1 in middle school, 1 in high school. They were the first to hear the weird walking around upstairs. The entire upstairs was their bedroom. It was one huge room. They'd gotten home from school and could hear something walking around upstairs. When the older of the 2 went to check, their room was empty. It wasn't long before I heard it too. It didn't happen constantly, just off and on the first 2 years. The other thing that happened off and on was assailing our choice of bread. Normally I kept the bread on top of the fridge. If it was white, it stayed there. If it was wheat, it would fly off the fridge and land on the floor. This happened numerous times before I just started putting it in the fridge itself. Towards the end of our 2nd year in the house, I began dating the man who would become my second, and ultimately late, husband. We were all having dinner one night, and he happened to look up to see a bottle of steak sauce that had been left standing on top of the microwave in the kitchen, hovering in the air about 4 feet away from the kitchen island where the microwave sat. He pointed it out, and we all looked to see it hover there for another 2 minutes or so before it just dropped to the floor. Soon after this happened, the first actually creepy thing happened in this house. The master bedroom was off the kitchen at the back of the house. The entry down into the basement was an open entry, the steps going down the south side of the kitchen into the concrete basement below. A wrought iron fence stood by the walkway, so somebody wouldn't fall down into the basement. If I was lying in bed, I could see this fence if the door to the bedroom was open. The basement weirded me out anyway, we'll get to that later, so I left the light on down there most of the time. So at night, there was light coming up from the basement and up into the stairwell. One night I had been reading in bed and turned my light off. I got this weird feeling that I was being watched. The kids were visiting their father, and the boyfriend was at work. He was security detail for a local bank. So I was home alone. I looked towards the door, and there was a head peering at me from under the wrought iron fence. It looked as if a person was standing on the steps and peeking under and between the bars of the banister. I could not see any features, nor could I see any shoulders, or a neck for that matter. Just a head. I'm pretty sure it had no hair, but that's about all I could really detect. Seriously creeped out, I got up and shut the bedroom door and locked it. The next day, the boyfriend moved the kitchen island for me, so it stood in front of the wrought iron banister. It stood there until I moved out 6 years later, and thankfully, I never saw the head again. It made its presence known, though. The 3rd year I lived in this location, the boyfriend and I got engaged, then married. He moved in and the walking around upstairs increased. My older daughter also had something knock on the wall by her bed more than once, which was odd because there was no way that anybody could get up to that point outside without a ladder. These occasional moments of oddness went on through year 5 and into year 6. Then the furnace died. That's when things got really bizarre. My friend hired a company to replace the furnace. That was all fine and good, until they actually had to work in the basement. The basement of this house had 2 sections. The back part, under the kitchen and master bedroom, had been added in the 1970s. It was made out of concrete and the sump pump was located there. The part of the basement where the furnace was the original basement. Rock walls and dirt floor. The house was your typical Midwestern 100-year-old home, and this type of basement was actually pretty common in this area. The water heater and furnace were both in this dirt room. Personally, I hated this room. It gave me the creeps, so I tried to stay out of there as much as possible. Thankfully, I didn't have to go down there very often. The furnace guys obviously felt the same way because ultimately 3 different companies were hired to replace this furnace. Nobody would work in the basement. They said they were slapped or pinched. One guy stated he heard voices, while another complained that he felt like he was being watched, even when he knew there was nobody down there but him. Amidst all of this, a new concrete base for the new furnace had to be placed. And in doing this, a lot of dirt was dug up and rearranged in the furnace room. This will become important later. This part of the project took 3 days to complete, so the workers left the majority of their tools, along with some duct work, in the concrete room so it would be ready for them when they got there in the morning. The second night of this part of the project, my husband had the night off and we were both home to go to bed at the same time for a change. We were lying in bed when we started to hear this faint scraping sound. It sounded like somebody was dragging a wrench across the concrete floor in the basement. We laid there and listened to the sound get louder and louder. My husband hopped up and went halfway down the stairs to the basement, and just stood there as the sound continued. He motioned me over, and I joined him on the steps. Everything was where it had been left in the basement. Nothing was moving, but we could still hear the weird sound of the very large wrench that was lying on the floor being dragged across the concrete, even though it wasn't actually moving. We went back up to bed, and after about 10 more minutes of this, my husband rolled over and smacked the floor 3 times and hollered, "Knock it the hell off!" 3 knocks came back, and the scraping sound ceased. The furnace replacement was then finished without any weirdness. But the moment the furnace guys completed their job, odd stuff started happening fairly regularly. Slamming and banging was frequent. Stuff in the kitchen would move on its own. Lights would go off and on by themselves, as would the television and the stereo. That winter was pretty eventful. Then came spring. Anybody who knows anything about the Midwest and snow knows there's a distinct possibility of one's basement flooding during the spring thaw, and given the dirt room had been dug into the fall before so they could place the new furnace, the room flooded, making a huge mess. I stayed home from work to shop vac in the dirt room to get all that excess water out of there so the furnace and water heater wouldn't be damaged. The kids were at school and my husband had worked all night, so he was asleep. The process was long and painstaking. Once the vac was full of water, I had to take the bucket out into the concrete room and dump it down into the sump pump, because the dirt room and concrete room were only connected by a door. The sump pump was totally useless for the dirt room. Go figure. The longer I went back and forth, the more evident it became that I wasn't alone down there. I would hear voices in the dirt room when I went into the concrete room and vice versa. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but there was distinct mumbling and grumbling going on. I finally got irritated and said out loud that if they weren't going to help me clean up the mess, they needed to shut the fuck up. The voices stopped. Life changed for all of us that summer. The older daughter was working pretty heavy hours since she was now in college and wasn't home often. Her sister went to spend the summer with her dad and his wife, and my husband was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Ever since I'd snapped at it down in the basement, the house had been quiet, save for the weird walking around upstairs. With my husband's illness, we weren't home as often. We were often at the VA or the local hospital. And while he was in the hospital, when I did go home, I was too exhausted to pay much attention to the odd noises and the lights having a mind of their own. That winter, my husband was in the hospital for an extended period of time. All 4 of my kids were there with me for the holidays, and a huge snowstorm hit right after Christmas. I'd gone up to the hospital to see my husband, and when I got back to the house, all 4 kids were spooked. They said somebody had been standing outside the kitchen window looking in at them. I went out onto the deck and showed them that there had been nobody out there. There was a lot of new snow, not to mention the window was 6 feet off the ground. Somebody would have needed a ladder, and it definitely would have shown up as dents in the snow. Never mind the footprints, of which there were none. The only footprints leading to and from the house were mine. By summer of the next year, we were told that my husband was going to die. There was no getting around it. We started planning for his funeral and preparing for the end. He went into a hospice facility with the VA, and I was usually home alone when I got to go home. Things seemed to taper off at this point, but I believe we just spaced whatever was going on because there were bigger things to worry about. The water in the house did start turning itself on and off around this time, but none of us commented on it more than once or twice. Towards the end of the summer, my husband passed away. It had been a long, horrible illness, and it was sad. And yet a relief when the end came, because at least he wasn't in pain anymore. The night he died, I had finally gotten home and was lying in bed, on my side, knees bent. It had long been my husband's habit to check out the internet when he got home from the midnight shift. If he found something he wanted to tell me about, he'd come perch on the edge of the bed and push against my knees to wake me up. That night, I'm pretty sure he dropped by to say goodbye, as my knees were pushed on. I'm pretty sure that was him. We survived the funeral and the aftermath. In-laws suck, just saying. And I determined that it was time to downsize. It was just me and my youngest at this point, so I determined that we would get a nice apartment. This, of course, meant moving. We packed up, hired a mover, and I paid somebody to clean the house top to bottom. The cleaner told me that the whole time she was in the house, she could hear people talking in one room or the other. She'd go into the room in question and the talking would cease. She was seriously spooked. To this day, my friend swears that her house was never haunted. There was never anything weird there when they were growing up. 3. The mountain in front of the house was always inviting, and I have a story to tell about it, but first, here are some interesting facts. I checked with my mom today and started discussing the land my family owned. Apparently, while the land is now split among the family, there are acres and acres. However, one of these lands was a large section of the mountain. Yes, my family owned a mountain. This immediately triggered a series of questions. While I would have wanted many more answers, I was short for time. In her Too Long Didn't Read, she said that it isn't based on word of mouth. She used to work in the fields that were up the mountain when she was young. So I stopped her there, and asked questions about the mountain's features to simply confirm if I was telling the truth. Or just talking out of my ass. First, here is what I had confirmed. The mountain was steep and dry in the direction of the house, but when you got to the top, it slanted at an angle downward. The slant was covered in brush and small trees, and sand that lined lots of yellow and red rock. However, when the land flattened down like a plain, it became a kind of forest. The trees were not too close together, but large, thick patches of grass and bushes. After this large area, it would go back to a steep angle facing another small city. I confirmed what wildlife was there, just to make sure that what I'm going to talk about wasn't anything she had ever seen or known to be in that area. I just wanted to know the main things to rule out. This included deer, coyotes, wolves, wild dogs, and so on. After I asked her if my grandma was ever serious about her stories, and she confirmed she indeed was, including the experiences she has had. One was relating to chains being dragged in the dirt behind her several nights, to the point it caused her to never walk home alone. Well, in this case it was just me, and I wish I hadn't. My grandmother always encouraged me to be adventurous, so I decided going up the mountain was the way to go. My mom reluctantly let me go only after she had given me at least some basic survival gear and taken my grandma's old yet powerful dog. This dog wasn't like ordinary dogs. It defended its territory viciously. It was essentially a border collie crossed with something that gave it some serious canine power. He was a good guard dog until, as far as I know, he died of natural causes while I was away some time later. He was only good at guarding, completely failed at any other dog task. His name was Pippi. Pippi and I started our adventure early in the morning. Took us until the sun rose above the horizon to slowly make our way up the mountain. My goal was to explore the downward slanted area and do some scouting before attempting the forest ahead. Pippi was more than happy doing his job, keeping a perimeter around me, while destroying some flowers every so often. I was flipping rocks, looking for geodes or anything interesting to bring back. But as I flipped a flat yellow rock, I noticed something. The silence. Not the wind or animals. Everything was still. And as I turned my gaze to see where Pippi was, I heard a loud snap in the direction of the forest. I just blinked and moved on. Nothing out of the ordinary. The dog was happily wagging his tail, waiting for our next move. I started to move around the forest and something seemed off. Not in a scary way, just an abnormal way. The light was not reaching too far into the forest. I know thick canopies can make the illusion of darkness, even on the brightest day, but these trees had a decent amount of space between them. I made the conclusion that the angle of the sun's light combined with the rising temperatures made the air thick with moisture, and was causing this illusion. I continued to walk, my journey uneventful, or so it seemed. The more I continued to walk, the more the dog's eyes began to dart to me, as if doubting my decision to press on. I took it as the dog was simply worried about our distance from home than anything else. But he started to do this again. But now to the forest. He started with the darting eyes, and it got to the point where he was snapping his head in the direction of the forest. He continued to do this until he finally stopped and didn't take his eyes off the forest. Now I know something is up. I assume this must be the end of my journey, as a predator may have been stalking me this whole time. I signal him to turn around, and we begin to work our way back. Every few minutes he would dart his head in the direction of the forest, and I kept on my toes. This attention to a potential predator was gone when we reached the area we were at before. As my thoughts began to calm, I felt an enjoyable breeze. How nice to finally cool off, I thought. But this feeling was shattered by the realization that my entire time there, I hadn't heard a single noise but the sound of my dog, myself, and the mysterious snap with no wind up until now. I took one last look at the forest to appreciate its beauty, but I knew better. I took note of the wind's direction. Not unusual to have sudden gusts of wind and breezes from random directions. However, this was no ordinary breeze. As I walked to and from different areas and directions, I noticed the wind is headed in one direction, the forest. Now I was more intrigued than anything else. I was convinced that the most likely explanation was a dry, hot pressure system was above the mountain, forcing cool air to the center, where the forest just so happens to be. I asked Pippi if he still felt a potential predator. He responded with a wagged tail and a saggy tongue. Sure, why not trust the dog's opinion? He had been right so far. We both walked to the edge of the forest. The same darkness was there, but I could make out where several trees seemed to open up again. My only goal at this point was to cross that dark part and face my unrealistic fears, or so I thought. I wasn't an idiot. If anything had been waiting for me, this dog would charge. He killed coyotes for fun. I, on the other hand, had been taught by my uncle at a young age to learn how to fight dogs and large wild cats. I had locked down dogs with ease, and killing a coyote or wolf was a self-defense not to be abused. Note, I never hurt a dog. They just pretend and we spar learning moves. Mind made up, I walked into the forest, nothing. No dread and no morbid feeling. The bushes were a bit annoying, but I made it past to the darkness. Feeling proud and strong, I inspected what I called a taunting forest. I turned to face the direction I came from, and there I saw Pippi at the edge of the forest. He hadn't come with me, and I somehow didn't realize it. Still glad, I smiled at him, but as I looked closer, the thought raced to my head. The sun should at least be close to 10 a.m. There was no reflection in his eyes, not light, and no forest. As the thought set in, I saw his body language change. In an instant he puffed up and showed his teeth. My stomach sank, and before I could think anything else, I dashed like a man clinging to the last string of life. As I ran, I saw the darkness follow my every step. All around me it seemed to be getting darker and darker, and just as I felt it overhead, I felt the hard rock on my shoe. In one move I turned around ready to either live or die, scared shitless and about to piss myself. Nothing but forest and a calm breeze. The dog let out soft whimpers and I backed away, not letting my eyes off the forest while keeping the dog in my field of view. I turned to look at the edge of the mountain down to the direction of the house. I saw my mom, who was nervously looking at me with a pair of binoculars. I waved in relief and made my way back down. Visibly shaken, I told my mom that I needed to talk to my grandma. My mom believed the reason to be that I'd seen a wolf or some crazy act of nature. I explained everything to my grandma, who oddly didn't immediately reply with a candid answer. She looked sad as she explained that she didn't have the answers, and the person who might have, my great-grandmother, had passed away not too long ago, and she had lived up close to 100 years old. Both our faces fell, and she slowly embraced me. I still have questions, and I intend to get answers. My recent talk with my family brought up even more stories, and one that we had all heard was that of the cursed or bloody gold that my grandfather was actually a part of, and was murdered for. But that is a story for another post. 4. So this story takes place around the time of the housing crisis back in 2008 or so. I was in high school at the time. A buddy I'll call Eric and myself would do some urban exploring by sneaking into empty, abandoned, and foreclosed homes. Of course, we'd do these explorations in the dead of night to avoid any trouble with the law. I can't give away the location because people now live there, and I have no scientific rational explanation for what happened. But I know what I saw and heard, so I'd like to share it with you all. So we set out around 12 a.m., just like we would any night. About an hour or so in, we find a house that I often saw on my walks to school. As we walk up to the house, we scan for anyone. Then we make our way down the large driveway that leads into the backyard of the house. The first thing I noticed is how tall the grass was. Like it hadn't been mowed in quite some time, months I'd say. Then I noticed a smaller house, further near the back of the property. We told ourselves we'd check that house out once we've explored the bigger one. We enter the bigger house from the door that leads into the garage, and from the garage we stepped into the kitchen. Believe it or not, the doors were unlocked. When we enter the kitchen, we see the house was almost pitch black. We can only see a few feet ahead thanks to the streetlights. So I use my own light source at the time, a cheap flip phone, with the screen brightness on max. We start our exploration down the hallway, and check out each room, 5 in total, counting the 2 living rooms. Eric is close behind me as we make our way through each room, and eventually back to the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, we chat about how nice the house is, and its size given the area it's in, much bigger than the surrounding houses. As we're talking, I notice a metal decoration hanging above the kitchen doorway. It almost looked like some sort of decorative shield. I pull it from its spot and inspect it closely. Once done, I can't figure out how to put it back, so I set it between my feet on the tile floor. I take a look at my friend and take a step into the kitchen. Then we both hear what sounds like something sliding along the floor, and then a bang at the end of the hall. Eric and I both freeze and stare at one another through the streetlight shining through the kitchen window. Eric whispers to me, "Is there someone here with us? Did someone follow us in?" I honestly didn't know. But after a minute or two, we decide to walk down the hall and see what the noise was. As my phone light creeps to the end of the wall, we see the shield I had just pulled down. We were both relieved, and I thought, well, maybe I kicked it when I stepped and didn't notice. I picked it up, and this time I figure out how it needs to be attached to its original position. Once again, I look at Eric and take a step towards him and hear a few clangs on the floor, and that familiar sliding sound across the floor and the bang against the wall. Now we're really scared and frozen, not moving for what seemed like forever. Then an even louder bang is heard at the other end of the house, and we both jump and stare into the dark hallway. Then again, bang, and then quiet, then 3 rapid bangs. Someone was thrashing around in the very last room in the house, and we didn't know what the fuck to do. Determined not to let this person scare us, we run towards the last room and confront this asshole. When we get there, nothing, no one. The room was empty, but how? Who? We were sure it was coming from this room. There's no way whoever it was slipped by us. The room had a sliding glass door leading into the backyard, but it was locked from the inside. Then, before we can gather our thoughts and ask each other what was happening, bang, bang, bang. This time from the kitchen. Scared out of my fucking mind, we both agree it's time to leave. We make our way through the back door in the room and finally to the street, all while checking over our shoulders to ensure no one was going to come running out of the house after us. No one came, and the neighborhood was quiet. Eric and I start our walk home, talking about the house when Eric notices his pocket knife is missing. He turns his pockets inside out to show me he isn't joking. We stop, and he keeps telling me we have to go back for it since it's his favorite one. Frustrated, I tell him, "How did you just lose it if it's your favorite knife?" He assures me he never removed it from his pocket, and has no idea how it could have been removed from his pocket. I agree to go with him and find it. We make it halfway up the street when Eric tells me his back feels like it's on fire. I can see it's really bothering him because of the expression of pain on his face. He asks me to lift his shirt and look at what could be causing the burning sensation. I lift his shirt and quickly notice 3 very large scratches starting from his right shoulder blade, going all the way down to his left hip, then from his left hip across to his right hip. I tell him this, and he immediately says the house is haunted, but he still wants to go get the knife. I'm scared, but I'm not going to let him go alone. So we make our way back into the house and immediately hear the banging noise. But we made a pact with each other that we would not run no matter what happened. We begin our search for the knife, looking high and low, all while hearing banging, and now things are being thrown across the room. Of course, I'm fucking scared shitless. I want to leave. But we haven't found the knife yet. We do one pass through the entire house and end up in the kitchen. In the kitchen, there is an entrance to the second living room that you can see from the backyard. In that room, there is one piece of furniture, a hutch. Now, we had already checked this room since it's near our point of entrance and found nothing. But we decided one more pass through the room would not hurt. I make my way into the dark room and let my light lead me to the hutch, and there it is. On the hutch we find the knife. But for fucking sure we checked this room and the hutch. He didn't hesitate for a moment. He grabbed the knife and we hightailed it out through the garage and back onto the street. We make our way to our homes, but the entire week we would talk about the house and what was going on in there. We brushed it off and didn't believe it. There had to be some explanation, so we go back. But we bring 3 friends with us, because they wanted to see this haunted house Eric and I wouldn't shut up about. While walking through the backyard, I can't explain it further, but for some reason I wanted to get a closer look at the back house. I start making my way towards the house, but I start to feel scared. A feeling of dread came out from nowhere. I turn away from the house and start my way back to the group. But at the corner of my eye I saw something leap from the bushes. Some dark figure leapt from the bushes and into the tall grass. But when I gave it my full attention, it was gone. I stared at the bushes for a moment, a little confused, but I brushed it off. I did mention it to the group when I caught up with them, but it was quickly dismissed. We entered through the garage door. This time we noticed a white bookshelf full of light bulbs in the garage. The bookshelf was probably about 5 feet high and 3 feet wide, and completely filled with packaged light bulbs. We study it for a moment, and make our way into the kitchen with Eric leading and me in the back. I entered last and shut the kitchen and garage door behind me. As soon as I released the doorknob, we hear what sounded like someone in the garage breaking all the light bulbs on the bookshelf. Stunned, I remember my heart beating a mile a minute, waiting for whatever the fuck it was to start trying to fight its way into the kitchen. But nothing came, and Eric finally said, "Fuck, I guess we're not going back now." We make our way to the very last room of the house, the same room Eric and I had exited through the last time we were there. Whatever it was did not disappoint. Random objects were being thrown against the wall in front of us. We could hear loud banging all throughout the dark house, like there were people fighting in the damn house. One of the friends decides he's had enough and opens the glass door to the backyard, and 4 of us start making our way through the backyard. I turn around to wait for Eric. He was not moving, caught in a daze, standing in front of an unhinged door that was propped against the wall for support. Eric was staring down the hallway as if waiting for something. I had to call his name 3 times before he realized we were leaving. He stepped forward, and before my eyes it looked as though someone tried to throw the unhinged door on top of him. Eric jumped out of the way and started towards me, scared out of his wits. The other 3 are already almost to the street, so we both just keep the pace and catch up with them. As soon as we reached the street, one of the friends kept telling us how fucked up that house was. You can see the look of terror on his face as he expressed his feelings about the place. He mentions a burning feeling going up his calf. Sure enough, he's got those fucking scratches starting from his ankle and stopping midway through his calf. Just before we split up to go home, the 3 of them swear off that place. And that was the last time those 3 friends spoke to us. We ended up going to the house a few more times after that, but nothing absolutely memorable happened. We heard the knocks and the bangs and whatnot. It wasn't until we took Eric's, I'll call him Derek for clarity and privacy, obviously, older brother that it got crazy. By the time we visited the house a few times and became numb to the banging and throwing, we found it more amusing than anything, like check this place out, it's haunted. This time it got more aggressive. After touring the house and seeing Derek freak out, we decided to have a chat in the kitchen. I was standing in front of the windows, leaning against the windowsill. Eric was to my right, leaning against the wall, and Derek was standing across from me in front of the doorway that leads into the second living room I mentioned earlier. We talked about how scary the house is and all that. Derek turned around to check out the living room from behind him. I mentioned to him that that's the hutch we found Eric's knife on after running around the whole house searching for it. As he turns to face me, Derek fell into the room almost like something pushed or dragged him from behind. I remember looking at his face and seeing a look of terror as he tried to grab on for dear life to the doorway. But the push and pull was too strong. and he fell on his ass into the room, but immediately jumped up and ran over to me. He grabbed me by the shirt and started screaming at me.
Yo, what the fuck is your problem? Why did you push me?
I just kept telling him that I didn't push him, and Eric jumped between us and confirmed what I was saying. Didn't push you, you fell in. Derek explains that someone or something pushed him in. After that, he obviously wanted to leave, so we all agreed. But before we leave, Eric and I both told Derek to check his pockets to see if anything was missing. Of course, his pocket knife was missing. But it's okay, we found the last one, we'll find this one, right? Search the whole house. Nothing, as expected. Now it's time to check the hutch. First pass, nothing. Second pass, nothing. Third, nothing. Okay. Now this knife is really fucking gone. Derek wants one more pass through the house. We agree. We make it to the far room with no luck. We start making our way back to the kitchen with me leading. As I'm coming up to the kitchen, my cell phone light starts to reflect off something, shining in front of the door that led into the front yard. It was the knife jammed into the door. There was no fucking way the knife could have been jammed into the door without any one of us hearing it. Derek takes his knife and we leave. I never went back after that. Out of all the bullshit that went down in that house, that was the not welcome sign I took seriously. And that's it. That's everything I can remember. Eric moved not long after that, and I moved away at the end of 2009. Haven't seen the house since. Except when I tell the story to friends, I'll pull up the house on Google Images. I visit Eric from time to time, and we always talk about what happened there. 5. Before I begin my experiences, I just want to note that since I was young, I've always remembered having bad dreams far more frequently than either normal or passive dreams. I've had 2 recurring dreams and multiple experiences prior to these events that I'm still trying to figure out that may relate to this story, but I'll save that for another post. As you will see, I'm still trying to piece the puzzle together. Here we go. About a year ago, I moved to the eastern side of Washington due to personal reasons, and thought of this move as another way to start over. Long story short, I've encountered a terrible welcoming of greedy landlords, depression, homelessness, etc. But the one good thing that came out of all of this was meeting my roommate, Sarah. We were both in similar situations, close to the same age, and I could tell off the bat she was a genuine person. Sarah and I decided to ditch our current living situation and find an apartment together. Background information. Sarah and I immediately bonded over our dreams when we first met. We both grew up having these strange dreams that continued until adulthood. Sarah is a student that moved from a distant city, and I'm currently not employed at this time of the events. Sarah has also grown up with way more terrifying experiences than I have had, so maybe I can convince her to write her own post one day. Sarah and I found a 2-bedroom apartment, 4-plex, on the 2nd floor story. It was a really small apartment community, but because we were both new to the area, we didn't know we lived right next to one of the big hotspots for crime in the area. We quickly figured this out when my car was broken into twice in the first week of moving in. Sarah and I were relieved. Honestly, at this point, we were just happy to have our own place with a roof over our heads. When we first moved in, most of our neighbors said hello and welcomed us, but our direct next-door neighbor who shared the 2nd floor story with us never said a word to us. I mean, it didn't bother us both or anything, but we could tell he was a very private man, extremely quiet. We later figured out he worked night shift at a hospital. He was roughly in his late 30s, we'll call him John. Anyway, whenever we passed by John or tried to speak with him, he wouldn't say anything and shuffle quickly back into his apartment. Like I said, it wasn't a big deal to my roommate or me. A couple months of living in the new house, I had one of the most vivid and realistic dreams I've ever had in my life. Like I've mentioned before, I'm used to having nightmares, but this one topped them all. This is what happened in my dream. Sarah and I were sitting watching TV in our living room late at night, and all of a sudden we hear this loud pounding on our front door. Sarah and I were looking at each other like, oh hell no, you answer it. Like I've mentioned, we lived in a bad neighborhood, so someone knocking on the door late at night was a huge red flag. The knocking keeps pounding, and eventually we see John looking through our windows. The strange thing, though, was that it wasn't like a, I'm going to come in there and hurt you both kind of look. It looked like he was looking for someone to help him. He was searching for something or someone. We both still didn't answer the door, and I eventually saw him through the window walk across back to his apartment. Later in my dream, I tell Sarah that I'm going to bed, and in my dream, I wake up to Sarah screaming my name, telling me to come help her. I jump out of bed and whip open the door, and I see a piece of Sarah's nightgown flash into the bathroom, and I continue to hear her screaming. I run into the bathroom, swing open the door, and she wasn't there. The bathroom door slammed behind me, and the lights started to flicker on and off extremely fast. I then heard Sarah screaming in the kitchen, "Help me! It's in here! It's going to get me! It's going to get me!" I run back into the kitchen, and I see Sarah pointing at the corner of our kitchen. I couldn't see anything, so I was begging her to tell me what she's seeing. For some reason, in my dream, I wasn't scared. If anything, I was pissed that something was in our house. But I know for damn sure if this happened in real life, I'd shit my pants. Then I suddenly see this horrific black mass with extremely long spiked ends around it. It was huge, and at the corner where Sarah was pointing at, I remember looking at it and saying, "You are not welcomed here. Leave now." The black mass then grabbed my right arm and started to hit myself with my own arm. I was pissed, and I started to get ready to scream at it again, and it made a demonic scream in my ear. It drowned out everything I was trying to say. That's when I woke up. When I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I was staring at my ceiling, and I kept hearing the demonic screaming in my ear. I felt like something heavy was keeping my chest down. Finally, like what seemed like maybe 5 seconds, I busted up real quick, and I was gasping for air, and the screaming was finally gone. The first thing I did when I woke up was look for my roommate. I looked at the clock, and it was around 9 a.m. Sarah had gone to school by now, so I was kind of relieved that it was only a dream. I immediately texted Sarah what happened in my dream, and surprisingly she told me not to worry about it, and that it was just a bad nightmare. Usually she'll dissect our dreams together with me, but she was convinced it was only a bad dream. I dropped it after that, but the dream was so intense and so vivid. It kind of threw my day off completely, you know? It was weird. I was told what I experienced was sleep paralysis. I always assumed before that kind of stuff was bullshit, but holy hell was I wrong. Anyway, fast forward later in the day. I was hanging out with a friend of mine when I found out I had 5 to 8 missed phone calls from Sarah. I immediately called her back, and the first thing she tells me, "You need to come home, now." And I'm like, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" She doesn't tell me anything except for the fact that the police are at our house, and I need to come down right away. I speed off to our house. There were about 3 to 5 police with caution tape surrounding the stairway to our apartment, cop cars blocking off the road to our house, and an empty orange body bag next to our front window. I immediately went to the first cop I saw, and he told me that our neighbor John had committed suicide in his apartment by shooting himself in the head. He proceeded to ask me for my statement with whatever I knew about John, and how he was acting the past couple weeks or days. I couldn't tell the officer much of anything, except for the fact that we never even spoke a word to each other, and that he was extremely private, it seemed. After I was done giving my report, I head into our apartment, and I see Sarah standing there, with a completely empty face. She asked me, "What time did you have that dream?" I told her I woke up from the dream around the exact same time I had texted her the dream earlier that morning. We both looked and confirmed it was around 9 a.m. Sarah tells me, "I spoke with the police officer, and he told me that the time of death was roughly this morning around that time." Sarah then asked me, "Where did you say that black mass was when I was screaming at it?" I want to note that our apartment layout is the exact same as the other units in the apartment complex. I showed her the exact corner of the kitchen, and she started to cry. and told me that's the exact spot where John shot himself earlier this morning. I didn't hear a thing or a gunshot during my sleep, or any cries of help from our neighbor. Things have been extremely weird in our apartment ever since that occurrence, however. It's been almost a little over half a year since all of this happened, and things have definitely calmed down. But recently I had another dream related to this one that I'm thinking about posting. My roommate and I have both promised each other we wouldn't talk about what happened in our house anymore, because it seemed to make whatever energy in the room upset. We've had a ton of weird experiences, and I'd love to share them with you all. If you have any questions, please ask away. I wish I had proof of some sort, but all I could really do is take pictures, or draw what I saw exactly, or the layout of my house. Thanks for listening, all. It's nice knowing that if the demon in our house kills me, at least someone will possibly know what happened to me. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to episode 100 of 5 True Paranormal Stories. And today we have a Q&A planned to celebrate, so let's just hop right on in. Number 1, Sketch Prevails. What would happen if you get more subscribers than Mr. Nightmare? I'd then have more subscribers than Mr. Nightmare. I don't imagine anything would change. I'd probably have a lot more complaints to deal with. Louise and Davis. Hello, Hellfreezer. Do you individually know who clicks on the like button, or is it just numbers to you? I don't actually know who clicks. I just see them go up. Don't see them go down. YouTube doesn't do that anymore. But no, I only know who's interacting with the channel if you happen to leave a comment. Next, Stetter something or other. Is it bad I sleep to this stuff? It's never bad to sleep, and whatever sends you off to the land of Nod, that's absolutely fine. Mark French. Hellfreezer, do you believe any of the paranormal stories you read? If so, why? If not, also why? Well, if I'm reading a story, even after I've asked someone to use it, if they've still told me I can use it in a video, if I'm reading through it and I think this is so obviously made up, because at first glance some of them seem quite plausible, I usually don't include ones that I think are completely implausible. The other ones are the kind I can keep an open mind with. That I can't personally say for sure what exactly may have happened in the story, but I certainly believe something happened, something inexplicable, something that most of us will never experience or even understand. And I don't believe in diminishing other people's experiences by unnecessarily doubting them, because what does it accomplish to doubt people with things like that? It doesn't accomplish anything. Okay, user not found. What do you think of America? I enjoy America. I think it's given a lot of great things to the world. I'm not actually crazy about your current leadership, but I'm not crazy about my own country's current leadership for a plethora of reasons. One of which is she hasn't technically been elected. Right, next up. Chintz. Where is the most interesting place you have been to in Scotland, and what industry is predominant there? My grandmother is from there, and I would like to visit someday. The most interesting place I've been to, I don't do a lot of travelling around. It's probably there was a wax museum in Edinburgh. I think it was Edinburgh, and they had like a kind of the Rogues Gallery section. And it's always struck in my mind because I was very little at the time, and it did frighten me when I was walking by, and there was someone imprisoned, and as you walk by it, there must have been motion sensors. It comes to life and starts rattling and screaming, and that's probably the most interesting place I've been so far. But for someone who lives in Scotland, I certainly haven't travelled about much in it. Industry is predominant there. Well, we used to be well known for making wire ropes. I'm not sure what the current one is. I'm tempted to say whiskey. Certainly is one of our biggest exports. It could well be oil and gas or something. I do know we did quite well off of that at one point, but I'm not sure. Let's go with whiskey. Probably a safe bet. Okay, next up, Valerie Ronquillo. Q&A. I'm sure it is frustrating for you to get permission from the authors of stories. No, not at all. It's just a normal part of doing the job. Record and have everything ready to upload when some a-hole informs you that you're in the wrong, when you very well know it's not the case. Well, that certainly is frustrating. What do you do to overcome this frustration? Do you take a step back, take a deep breath and move on, or do you curse, spit a few things? If I'm really rattled, it can take me a couple of weeks before I settle down. Which explains why my psoriasis has been acting up lately. And all the caffeine. But yeah, I do not deal well with stress at all. That's why I generally try to stay mellow. Try not to go out of my way to be a dick to other people, even if I'm in a mood, because I know I'll just feel worse, and there's no point spreading my misery, making them miserable, and then making myself feel miserable in return. It's very bad. But I do whatever I can to de-stress. Probably work myself too hard, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah. Too easily stressed. And usually the only solution is, even if I know 100% rationally there's nothing to stress about, there's always that little voice in your head that goes, yeah, but what if this happens? And then you're back to stressing, even though you know you shouldn't. Okay. Paul Fowler. Are there hauntings in your area of Scotland? No, I don't think there are. Not that I know of. The place I used to work in, they did claim there was a ghost, but I never witnessed anything like that. I want to see that beautiful Scottish mug. Was that in the last Q&A? I don't think it was. Anyway. Q&A. Are you a man of culture? What anime do you like, Hellfreezer? I'm not really into anime. I have nothing against it, it's just not something that's ever appealed to me. I remember I've seen things here and there many, many years ago. I'm sure Channel 4 used to show them late at night at some point, but it's not something that's ever appealed to me. As for being a man of culture, well, everyone's of culture. It's just a matter of what culture, or what you personally think has merit. But as for anime, nope. No problem with its existence. It's just nothing that's ever clicked with me. Corpse. By the way, Hellfreezer, what the fuck is this misc thing on your channel homepage? It's miscellaneous. It's a playlist for miscellaneous videos. I think it's ones I've favorited, not my own. Just ones I've found on other channels I've added to a miscellaneous playlist. The Keeper of Meow. How do you know when I eat lunch? Well, there are actually many Hellfreezers in the world. It's a bit like Santa Claus. And I have them stationed in the bushes outside of all my subscribers' houses. So I generally know when you do everything. When you eat, when you go to bed, when you poop. Hellfreezer knows everything. Brutally honest. Hellfreezer, are you ever going to do a face reveal? Nope, no plans for it. I think about doing it occasionally, but for the moment, no plans beyond the older pictures that I've shared on stream. Fire Armageddon, you're a Scot, aren't you? I included this for anyone who may not be aware yet. Yes, I am. BTS trash, what does MSN mean? Young ones, gather round the fire while Grandpa Hellfreezer tells you the tales of MSN. It was a messenger system back in the day. The days when the cavemen had to use dial-up and we used to ride brontosauruses to work. But yeah, it was a messenger system precursor to Windows Live Messenger, which was pretty much just MSN under a different name, so I quite like that one too. And then they were retired in place of Skype, which I have no interest in using, even though they tried to sneak it back onto my computer during the last update. Wasn't happy about that. Okay, moving on. AJAKUK1. Question for Q&A. Can you please say balls? It cracks me up every time. Balls. Undefined. Can you tell us your true paranormal story, please, if you have one? The closest thing I have to paranormal is that for a number of weeks, I dare say months, after my mother passed away, I'd hear her shouting my name. Generally while I was waking up. So there is a rational explanation as to why I would be hearing that. My brain was used to it, so it could well have been filling in the blanks. In a way, I like to think maybe she was still looking out for me, but it depends on the day you catch me. Some days I think, well, no, it was obviously just the more rational one. Other days, well, I hope the less rational one was true. The Epic Ashley. You mentioned that you're not religious. I'm not either, but I have a huge interest in the paranormal. Sometimes there's a part of me that wants to believe in ghosts or spirits. Just wondering if you've ever felt the same way. Have you ever experienced something that made you less skeptical? Right, as I always do, if questions are similar, I'll pop them up on screen. I certainly... It's more of a hope than a belief. I certainly would not like to think that this mundane world is all there is. Claire Larson. Do you have a P.O. box for fan mail and such? I don't. I have looked into it. They're super expensive to run, at least for the budget that I'm on. And I do know some YouTubers that had them, like Ashens, for example, Stuart Ashens, who actually got a lot of use out of his P.O. box, shut his down. So it wouldn't really be practical for me to keep that up. It would be hundreds of pounds to maintain a year. And would you ever consider coming to the States for a meet and greet? Well, that would kind of go against my no face reveal policy. But never say never. I certainly would like to go to America one day, see the sights and so on. But I also wouldn't want to go alone. Or if I was going to go, I'd want there to be people there to welcome me. So never say never. And Turtles 5 Indy Q&A. Do you think walruses have terrible breath? No, walruses actually use mouthwash. In fact, next to human beings, they are the biggest consumers of mouthwash. Well, not consumers, you don't actually swallow it. And walruses know that because they're very intelligent. They are the biggest purchasers of mouthwash in the world today. Sketch prevails. If the story is personal business, would you narrate that story anyways? Well, people either send me stories, in which case I assume they want me to narrate it, or they'll post it on sites like Reddit, in which case I contact them privately and ask if I can use it. At that point, I'm assuming they're comfortable with the idea of other people knowing it. But I don't just go ahead and narrate stories. There's always has to be permission. So, no, I guess is the answer. Panama Girl, is it possible for you to start doing more paranormal scary stories? Thanks. No. I like the mix I currently have on the channel. I did reduce the number of scary stories I was doing from 3 a week to 2 a week, because at that time it was harder to get those stories. And while I could probably push it a little bit more now, I quite like the greater variety. I've basically turned my weekend over to more light-hearted videos, and I'm enjoying those. The videos I'm doing on the weekend right now are actually doing very well. In some cases, they're actually doing a bit better than the Scary Stories videos. So for the moment, no plans to do more paranormal or scary. Georgina Macaulay. Caramel macchiato, hot or cold? Cold. Always cold. I get them in those. It's those little Starbucks ones you get in supermarkets. So it's iced coffee. There's 5 Andy. Did you ever put butter on a Pop-Tart? No, I'm not a monster. Whatever. Hi, Hellfreezer. What if you use one story from Creepypasta and set the question which one from 5 stories were not the true one? No, I don't like to mess around with people like that. It might be fun, definitely, for some people, but it would seem disingenuous, hope I'm using that word right, to present, a true story video, but then, I guess which one isn't true. And I wouldn't really enjoy that. Right, sink or swim? Oh, right, of course. Is there much call for being a voice actor in your country, Hellfreezer? I'm sure you'd be highly sought after talent if so. I don't know. I'm certain there are talent agencies. Voice acting is something I'd like to try if I can ever go over the notion of being told what to do. But I'll have to actually put myself out there, try and get an agent, try and book gigs. But there's an arts and theatre industry in Scotland. There are certainly many creative people, many talented people come from here. So I'd say yes, there probably is. Not just in Scotland, throughout the UK. We certainly do have a booming entertainment industry. Alrighty. Carla Kirkpatrick. Been riding your bike? Been attempting to. Georgina Macaulay, questions for eventual Q&A. Paranormal glitch occurrences. I've already answered the paranormal. I feel exactly the same about the glitch. I've had odd things happen to me, just little odd things happen to me, like being grocery shopping, put stuff that was definitely picked up, paid for, put in the middle of the bag. I get home and they're gone. But again, keep an open mind. Mostly hope it's true. Have you had any stalkers or complete whack jobs contact you? Thank you in advance. Well, I would never use the term whack jobs. I had overly enthusiastic fans, perhaps. 1 second. Feeling a bit parched, some iced tea. But no, I don't really get crazy fans, for which I'm very grateful. Certainly wouldn't want a stalker. That doesn't sound like any fun whatsoever, for me or them. They're constantly getting rejected. I'm living in fear for my life. Nobody wins there. Darrell Edwards. Enough with this writing. Back for your health. And no, I will do whatever it takes to improve my health, even if it kills me. You're going to injure yourself badly, not be able to work your toes. And then where will we be? That seems like a lot of effort. No. I'll keep doing what I can to improve my health, riding the bike, punching the punch bag. Just bought a decent blender. I have one, but it was a cheaper one that couldn't do frozen food, like frozen fruit and things. So I've bought one that can handle that. Should be here by Monday. Well, Amber, how old are you? I'm 36 years old. I will be 37 on the 19th of September. Boy and the Talking Tick Balang. Have you considered reading awful fan fiction? Well, as you see, that would require me to firstly get permission to use somebody's story. Tell them, by the way, your story's awful. Would you mind if I did a reading of it so I can make fun of you? And that wouldn't be very nice, would it? I would want to ever put down someone's attempts to be creative. It takes a great deal of courage to be creative and put yourself out there. So I certainly wouldn't want to be the kind of person who put them down or made them feel bad for attempting to create something. So no, I wouldn't want to do that. I also don't really read fan fiction, so there's also that. Sketch prevails. Do you have any plans for Legbeard stories? Well, there are a smaller number of Legbeard stories versus the Neckbeard stories. So I don't plan to do a separate video for them, so I'll just keep the Legbeard stories in with the Neckbeards because I think they fit quite well there. Nicole C. Live stream. Well, live streaming would be fun. I've already started doing the live streaming, and the past two have gone quite well. That'll probably also mean I won't do many more Q&As because the live streams are essentially just Q&As anyway. And they're also kind of a more fun way to do it, to be honest with you, because it means I have to be a bit more improvisational in my answers. I can't stop and think and consider them, so yeah, that's actually a lot more fun. So any more Jack and the Continuum videos in the near future? Kinda, sorta, maybe. Currently, the reason I haven't been doing any extra videos like the Jack or the Dracula or the poems or the fairy tales or anything else extra that I do is because I'm currently recording an audiobook for an author by the name of Donovan Edwards. The book's called The Denver Demon, and my free time, like I'd usually record extra stuff on a Sunday when the mood takes me. Currently I'm dedicating time each Sunday just so that I can still make sure I'm getting all the regular videos done, but to recording some of that book to try and get that finished. So there won't be any extra stuff on the channel until I'm able to get that finished. When that's done, the regular things, the regular stories, bonus stories like the adventures of Jack and Dracula and so on, should hopefully resume. Darrell Edwards. Interesting idea to do streaming. Can you talk about what the Photoshop restoration is in your next Q&A? Well, as you guys will have seen, now for those of you who haven't seen it, there's 2 up already. Basically, I'm restoring pictures digitally using Photoshop, fixing any blemishes. Sometimes the pictures are quite heavily damaged and you have to rebuild parts of people's faces and backgrounds and things like that. And then when I'm done with that, some of the pictures I want to kind of give a bit more of give a new life to, and with those ones I'm manually adding colour to them. Tick Point talking Tick Balang. Why don't you read fairy tales and other literature anymore? Well, as I said, they will return at some point. Jason Marin, have you ever considered adding animations to any of your stories? I have considered it, but to pay an animator what their skills would be worth would be very expensive for me, and it would be cost prohibitive. Unless I learn how to animate myself, which I've got a lot on my plate right now in terms of creativity and things I'm trying to learn and skills to master. So open to it, but currently not planning on doing anything like that. Rand, do you believe in paranormal? Covered that one. Julie Abraham. Are there any kinds of stories you flat refuse to do? Anything that's too graphic. I don't mind references to kind of heinous things like rape, molestation, that sort of thing. But if it's too detailed, if it's essentially the entire focus of a story, I don't really want to do that. I'm not comfortable reading it. I don't think people are comfortable listening to it. And unless it's sent by a subscriber and I get the impression it's very important for them on some level to share the story and get it out there, then it's not something I'll do. I certainly don't seek them out. Victor Valdez. Do you have any stories of your own that could go in a paranormal story? As I mentioned, just that little one about my mum. About a non-paranormal story, well, I have told the story of the robbery before, but those are really the only 2 things that stick out in my mind. Would you ever do a personal experiences video? I do talk about things that have happened to me in retail, just weird things and customers and all, but I save them for the end of the retail videos, generally because if I have to sit down and think, I'm thinking through a very lengthy period of my life I don't really want to think about because I hated it. But if I'm reading stories, it'll sometimes spark a memory in my mind, and I'll talk about that in the outro. But not a whole video. Enzy Johnson, Hellfreezer, have you seen the movie Flatliners? I believe I have, but it was a long, long time ago. I also read that as Frighteners the first time I looked at that question, which I have also seen and is very, very good. Raven Fox, I do love your voice. I'm curious, how old are you? I've already answered that. 36, going on 37. Going on 3700. Shane Phelan. Where do you live? UK, I'm guessing. I live in central Scotland. How old approximately? Is this your full-time job? Yes, it is. Or are you retired? Well, no, I'm not that old, but thank you for thinking I might be. Do you drink alcohol? I certainly hope so. I'm afraid I'm going to have to disappoint you, Shane. I never drink alcohol. Other people are certainly welcome to. It's just never appealed to me. Thanks for a great story as Fizzbud. Okay. Procrastinator 9. Yeah, Hellfreezer, you seem a well-educated fellow. What's your CV? I'm not incredibly well-educated. I finished high school and went, well, I'd like to say straight into employment. Went straight into looking for a job, which, although I tried very hard, it seemed very difficult at the time. So it took me a few years, but eventually got a job. I did that for almost 15 years, and as soon as I could, I got the hell out of Dodge and did this. Okay, yes, this is for the Q&A. First off, you've mentioned a few times that you enjoy playing a handful of video games in your free time. Figured you might like to know I listen to your videos every day, and in a roundabout way, you're helping fuel the production of the PS4 game Days Gone. You make my work days so much more enjoyable, and I'm thankful for your narrations. It is good to know that. I think I stumbled across something a little while ago. It was about a video about some of the people involved in making that game. Maybe it was another game, but I think it might have been that one. So I'm glad I'm helping people be creative. Feel free to do a PC port on that one if you'd like, though, because I don't have a PS4. From your experience, when you worked customer service, what's your best personal adventures of fast food and retail story? If you're up for it, could you share one funny or one scary, sketchy situation during your time there? My best story, the one that I occasionally think of and smile, it was kind of a short one, is it was late at night, literally the store was closed, as a supervisor was trying to lock the door. Then a guy comes in, literally as she's trying to lock the door. She's like, oh, sorry, store's closed. And anybody with a brain in their head would go at that point and go, oh, I'm very sorry, and go away. And he wasn't leaving. So what I did is I snuck up behind him, very, 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 very close, like inches from him. And I said in my manliest voice, is there a problem here? He jumped, literally actually jumped. And I just said to him, shop's closed, pal. And I gestured towards the exit he was already standing in. I gestured he should leave, and off he went, because I think he was so shaken. And that occasionally makes me smile. That's about the only thing that makes me smile from my retail days. Scary or sketchy situation during your time there? Well, a lot of sketchy situations. A lot of sketchy people, some of whom actually worked for the shop. To be honest with you, like I say, I mentioned the robbery, but apart from that, I didn't really get scared working there. I was mostly bored, occasionally angry, but mostly nauseous because it was such a sickening place to work. Well, not for the most part, but towards the end, it was not good. Okie dokie. Onward. Miss Brooke, if you can let us know when the audiobook is complete. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying I'd like the details. Thank you for another awesome video. I will let you guys know when it's complete. I'm not sure it would be to everyone's taste, but I certainly will. There's a lot of rumpy-pumpy in it. A lot of rumpies being pumpied, you know, men shagging men, men shagging women. Basically everybody's getting shagged all around, to be perfectly honest with you. And there's even a demon doing a bit of shagging in there. So perhaps not one for the younger viewers is what I'm saying, but I'll certainly will be plugging it when it's done, and when it goes up. I'm not sure exactly what Donovan wants to do with it. Maybe Audible. I was looking into the breakdown on that, and they take a hefty chunk of the revenue, and the other 40% is split between the narrator and the author. So I'll need to see what Donovan wants to do with it. But yeah, I will be plugging it when it comes out. I know that wasn't really a question, but it did give me an excuse to talk about it. Juana Legrand. Mulder or Scully? Why? This one I'm not quite certain what context you mean. Who would I want to be? Be partnered with? Go to bed with? Scully to all three, to be perfectly honest with you. She's smarter than Mulder. More skilled. And when you're Mulder, you've got to talk like you're constantly depressed all the time. Scully, I'm all backed up from eating those seeds again. Could you get me that extra roll of toilet paper out of my desk? Scully. Yeah, nobody wants that, so definitely Scully to all three. I had such a crush on Gillian Anderson when I was young. Well, I say when I was young. I've still got a massive crush on her. Melanie Rose. Oh, my question for the Q&A are, what's your favourite conspiracy theory? I don't really buy into conspiracy theories. They can be fun to read. But, well, let me think. Is there any I especially like? You know what? Yeah. Don't believe a word of it, but it's always fun to read whenever people speculate that celebrities have been replaced with lookalikes, like apparently Paul McCartney was, and the guy we know as Paul McCartney now isn't. And apparently Avril Lavigne was replaced with a lookalike as well. Your favourite creepypasta is abandoned by Disney. There is a reading of it somewhere way, way back in my channel. Tempted to delete that and re-record it, but well, I did put a lot of effort into the first one. Justin Taylor. Q&A question. Can you do a full Scottish rant? You know, in spite of what some people think, Justin, we Scots are not all angry, grumpy buggers. That Peter Capaldi has done nothing for his people. I suppose you're thinking I'm sitting here with a can of Newcastle Export, ginger hair, big beer gut, barely keeping it together, while munching on haggis as a snack, and only munching on the haggis because my heroin dealer's out of town. Hope that wasn't too grumpy for you, Justin. Thanks for your question. Alexander, question for Q&A. Do you make sure how old we are after we submit a story to you? Well, I do stipulate how old you need to be. If I get the impression somebody's younger, I will ask them outright. But as a rule, you need to be about 16. If you are younger than that, you'll need to get permission from your parent or guardian before you submit a story. But I only check for sure if I have a reason to doubt how old you are, because most people know the rules. Do you wear glasses? No, I don't. Oddly, I think I'm the only one in my family that doesn't. Matt Staffen, what Arizona iced teas do you have there? If it's a sweet tea, try cutting fresh lime and squeezing into a glass before pouring in a sweet tea. No, we only have 2 available. Used to be 3, but only have 2. It's green tea with honey or green tea with pomegranate. My favorite is just the regular like iced tea, but with lemon that Arizona iced tea do. But I just can't get that anymore. But thankfully, the 2 stores, one has them regularly in stock, the other only occasionally gets them in. The occasional one's the cheapest, so I wish to keep them in stock a bit more. But thankfully, the 2 stores that do sell them aren't very expensive. Because the only other place I've seen it sold is the local Tesco, and they charge more than double, I think, what I pay for the can. And it's about the same size. Okay. Momo. Hellfreezer. Is there a story you've read that sticks out more than others? I gotta be honest, at this point I've read so many stories, everything kind of becomes a blur. So unless I'm looking for stories and I see somebody's username, then suddenly I'll think, hang on, that's familiar. Have I done a story by them before? Then I'll look through the things they've posted previous and I'll say, oh, yeah, I've done that one, I remember that one. Which actually happened recently in Thursday's Glitch video. There's a story by somebody whose paranormal story I'd used about a year previous. And I didn't remember until I saw the username. But stories actually stick out. I think there was a scary story that actually was more of a funny story than any others, and that's kind of what inspired me to start doing funny stories, because I had a really good time doing it. It took place in the pizza place. What made you decide to start narrating stories? I started off listening to other people, and eventually thought, it sounds like a lot of fun, I think I'll give it a go, so I did. Sketch prevails. Do you know any YouTubers very well personally? There are no, as far as I'm aware, there are no other YouTubers near where I live. There are certainly other YouTubers in Scotland. There are certainly many YouTubers in the UK, but I've never actually met another one. There are some I do occasionally talk to a little bit on Twitter, but for the most part I don't really know anybody incredibly well. At least not yet. That might change. Hopefully it'll change at some point in the future. And R. I'm not sure if you've been asked before, have you had any paranormal experiences? Covered that. Another would be, have you experienced any glitch in the Matrix situation? Nothing major. Just teeny tiny little things that might have a rational explanation. Either that or the Hellfreezer from another universe is getting all my groceries that go missing. Probably got better hair than me, better skin. I'll bet that bastard's married to Gillian Anderson as well. God, I hate him so much. Anyway, next question. Icelia. It's a complete guess. I apologise if that's not correct. Do correct me if it's wrong. What suddenly urged you to make a YouTube channel specifically for narrating and reading? Did you have confidence in your voice when you began? Well, like I said, I was inspired by other people. And did I have confidence in my voice when I began? I was very nervous. And I certainly obviously had enough confidence, enough ego lurking within me to even try it. You need a little bit to try it. But I was very nervous that it would not be well received and no one would want to hear anything I had to say. At which point I would have deleted the video and just went back to having my channel to follow subscriptions. But no, people liked it. And then I started to feel a bit more confident. I've always been quite nervous about my S's, my sibilants. But when I started narrating, I became much more confident in that sort of thing. I learned basically to attack those S's like they'd insulted my mother, and I feel a lot better about that these days, and about my voice in general, to be honest with you. Paulina Sabina, just out of curiosity, what are the major touristy attractions in Scotland? Well, let's see, off the top of my head. This is not a full and comprehensive list, but there's Edinburgh Castle. I think Loch Lomond is quite popular with people. There's Gretna Green. Loch Ness seems to be very popular with people trying to find Nessie, even though I think it was proven to be a hoax, wasn't it? And there are many, many more, but I'm completely spacing on actual ones. There's various museums and things as well that are certainly worth a look. Okay. Can you recommend me a book? I recommend you many books. Pretty much all of Stephen Fry's autobiographies, especially the audio versions because he reads them himself. I would recommend Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I'd recommend the entirety of the Anno Dracula series. And, oh, actually, yes, I'm really loving right now. It's a series of books. There's 3 at the moment. I think there'll be a 4th. I've even heard a rumour they're going to attempt a TV adaptation. That should be interesting to see. It's called Warlock Holmes, where Sherlock Holmes is not as intelligent as... certainly not stupid, but certainly dimmer than he is in the regular stories. And Watson's much more intelligent. But he's also a very, very powerful warlock. So I highly recommend those. Favourite fast food and favourite healthy food. Favourite fast food is burgers, basically, just various kinds of burgers. Especially when I haven't done it for a while, but especially when I make them myself. But that kind of contradicts the fast food angle, I guess. But yeah, just burgers, fries. I quite like pickle on it as well, actually. Not very fond of tomatoes on my burgers. I'm not very fond of raw tomatoes at all. Anyway, healthy food. Well, just smoothies, to be honest. Smoothies. Various kinds are probably not that healthy. Although, like I mentioned, I've bought a better blender, so I should be able to make healthy versions of the ones I've been buying from the stores. Okay. Reddish Fox. For the Q&A. My husband and I love to listen to your stories as we fall asleep. It helps with my insomnia. So thank you so much for your channel. Can you please do some more Idiots in the Wild or Neckbeards, or a selection of Weirdos on Wednesday Stories? Just a name suggestion. We really appreciate everything you do. Well, the Idiots in the Wild kind of just happen. Those are stories I come across while I'm looking for the retail and the various other ones. So I'm still going to keep doing them, but that's just kind of a gradual thing. The Neckbeard videos, I am actively trying to do them at least once every 2 weeks. Because at the moment they're very, very popular. I don't know why, but I'm very glad that they are. So I'm going to try for every 2 weeks, but it's really dependent on how many stories I get sent and how many stories I can find. But when I can do it, I will definitely be doing those videos. Okay, next up, Carla Kirkpatrick. Is your place of residence is beyond the lock and past the brae? This is a line from a cartoon. Can you guess which one? Nope, no idea. It's not the true line, but still try to guess. I think of Queen's bicycle race. Nope, I have no idea. Okay, Blue Lady 4848. What type of music do you like? Or some of your favorite musicians or bands? I like a fair mix, but my favorite musicians and bands: George Michael, Matchbox 20, David Bowie. Don't judge, but I like Celine Dion as well quite a bit. Sheryl Crow. And as for like smaller at the moment, I'm certain they'll all get bigger one day. I like people like Keena Grannis, Kate McGill, Dodie Clark. I've heard quite a few of her songs. She's quite good as well. And Mary Spender. I quite recommend Mary Spender. She's a guitarist, writes her own music, performs, so she's very good. Okay, next up. Dirty 5 Indie. Do sea cows taste like hamburgers? Maybe chicken. They taste like prawn crackers, actually, if you cook them enough. 5 Indie. Why are horses so noisy when they should be quiet? Well, it's a little known fact, known only to myself and crazy people, no connection there, that when the horses are making so much noise, they're actually sending signals, they're communicating with each other, because horses are in fact the secret rulers of the world. And the fact of the matter is, when the horses are talking, they're discussing how best to take care of the human race, because they're actually quite fond of us. So we should all be grateful and not pry into that too much. Flymus. For the Q&A, do you believe in ghosts and other creatures? Covered that one there. Next up, Darrell Edwards. You still messing with that bike? I've just resigned myself to the fact that the bike is going to be an ongoing process of trying to keep it working. I was hoping I'd just have to oil it and pump the tires up now and again, but yeah, at this rate it's going to be practically a new bike. Okay, Janet DiMichele. Hey, my birthday is December 22nd, so you're a Virgo as well. Yep, that's right, I am. Regina McGee. I think these are the last questions, actually. What is your political stand? Like, are you more libs or more conservative? Yeah, I'm pretty much full-on liberal, for the most part. Although I do often find myself rolling my eyes at pretty much everybody in the political spectrum. But yeah, for the most part, I'm a liberal. Basically, do what you want in life, don't be a dick. That's my philosophy. and I plan to stick to it. 2. Would you narrate my work if I had a series/fictional story written? Yes, I would, but at the moment I have a lot on my plate to finish up. I also want to get Jack and Dracula finished, but if down the line, once those are all wrapped up, I would be willing to do more fan-submitted fiction. Okay, and I think, yeah, that brings us to the end. Well, this one was a bit shorter than the last one, but I think I've Q&A'd you all out lately. So let's wrap up there, because it's time for Hellfreezer to go get some snacks. It's also time for Hellfreezer to start work on the weekend's videos. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Now, before I go, I do want to say thank you very much to everybody who's been joining me on the live streams recently. If you have been enjoying them, as you seem to have been, I will be doing more. I will be doing more photo restoration, but I am open to other ideas. I don't really want to do live readings because, for me, the live streams are kind of impromptu. And while I could probably do poems and things like that because they're shorter and there's less chance of messing them up, if I was going to do a live reading, I'd want to have time to practice and prepare so that I didn't ruin the material, essentially. But yeah, I do plan on doing more in the future. None for the next few days, I don't think. We'll see how I'm feeling at the weekend. But there will be more. Okay. And that wraps up episode 100 of the Paranormal series. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.